love that you have a metric there. So I kind of feel that it's necessary to introduce you a little bit about who I am and why I joined the Topple team originally, and where I came from and why we started this venture. So originally I am, so the accent, South African, which you probably saw from the write-up in the meetup. But ultimately what happened in 2009, I spent a year backpacking around the world. So after this trip, my mission for this trip was to change the world, right? So very ignorant young person thinking that I can make a difference. And during this time, saw a very interesting dire need for low-cost capital in some of these regions. So a lot of the projects I was getting involved in, I actually mixed cement in certain cities and villages physically, first time in my life. But I saw this scaling issue, right? Like there was just this constant issue of people not having the funding necessary to bring their business into their local economy and grow that local economy. So after, actually during this time, I got recruited to come to the US on a track and field scholarship. So moved to Arkansas, of all places. And at that point, had no clue where Arkansas was, but a full ride on an NCAA scholarship was a really great way to come to the United States. So after this time, while at university, I actually spent a lot of time doing very different things, because having a full ride meant I could get 169 credit hours. So during this time, I got a math degree and then focused on law, where I spent some time in a moot court team where we'd go to law schools across the country arguing Supreme Court cases. And because I was in a department that it was obligated to do computer science, made me also learn C++, Python, and other languages, where now, as a statistician, I use R. But after this time, moved to Houston. My husband took a job here in Houston. So then had this one woman, her name is Rebecca Richicorda, that fascinated me. And last year, she was on the Fortune 50 list for most influential global leaders. Sent her an email and asked her if I could come volunteer for her. She emailed back almost immediately, which was very strange because I can only imagine this woman gets millions of emails. So I started volunteering with her. At that point it was still a startup, but it's a nonprofit focused on global health. And we worked in Malawi, Tanzania, and all these different regions. And what I learned from her was scaling. So eventually, after volunteering became a real job. They started paying me. And then I saw a very interesting scaling methodology from them. So at that point, I was at Rice, and the organization is affiliated with Rice University. So then there is a Center for Computational Finance, a part of Rice, and it allows me to do a PhD in statistics while simultaneously doing an economics master's. Shortly after, I found out I'm actually the first person to try and attempt that. But 4 years later, I am proposing next month, and I'm almost done with my economics degree. Now, during all this crazy, my first semester at Rice, I met Chris, the CEO of Topple, Tyrant CEO. So now I want to tell you guys, like, what is Topple and what's the problem we're trying to solve with what we're doing? So what we've done is we looked at how we can solve a specific problem, and ultimately what we did is we said we built an application-specific blockchain that's only focused on high-yield impact investment into emerging markets. Okay, so there's various features on top of this blockchain, but let me first tell you guys what problem we're solving. So back in 2015, the UN established the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. Now, these are a broad set of initiatives focused on how poverty can be reduced, gender equality can be achieved, how to increase access to clean water and clean energy, and many others. Now, as you can only imagine, this doesn't come cheap. So every year, we're $2.5 trillion short in the investments we're making into these areas. Okay, so that's the social issue. The other piece here is an opportunity. Every year, if we were to increase in developing economies the average income just to 10,000 USD, which is still less than a quarter of what it is here in the US and in the Netherlands, where Topple also sits, that would mean for $32 trillion more in global economic opportunities. Okay, so it is very reasonable to ask me now, okay, so if these opportunities exist and these problems are so severe, why does this persist? So my question to you is, who here has started their own business? Okay, so if I told you that the best money you could get is a 40% interest loan, would you still start your business? Probably not. Interestingly, this is the problem that is faced in most of these regions. There is just not enough capital or enough opportunity for them to raise capital. Now, I'm talking middle market here, right? These companies are not big enough for the banks to actually want to evaluate them, right? Because bank financing is limited to their national interest rates and their borrowing costs within these local regions. So there's still a lot of growth and opportunity in these regions. So, for instance, recently I was back in South Africa, and one of the tender houses, they have 10 positions available for government tender, right? They had 20 applications. The guy literally told me the rest of these 10 can grow our economy tremendously, but we need investments into these regions because we just don't have the supply to fit the demand of these projects that are coming in. They can completely grow the infrastructure of South Africa, but they just don't have that money. So the question and the problem that comes in here is, so how do we get foreign direct investment or foreign direct capital into these regions? The biggest thing is it has to be bigger than just a fund. It has to be bigger than just an algorithm. It has to be a whole infrastructure. So what we did is we said, okay, we need something that's more transparent, more intelligent, and more profitable. So surprisingly, given that this is a talk about Topple, we built this infrastructure. So I'm going to walk you through the infrastructure, how it works, and then I'm going to go through an example of what we're doing in Colombia. And then after that, I'm going to walk you guys through more examples of what we've been doing in Rwanda, in Fiji, in South Africa, and so forth. Okay, so how this infrastructure works. You have, in country, we have global partners on the ground. So these are referred to as hubs. Okay, these hubs then source projects, local ventures, onto the platform. When these projects are sourced onto the platform, they're risk assessed. Now, they're not risk assessed by us. We're not that smart. They're risk assessed using prediction markets. So think about a crowdsourced due diligence done on this project, upload their information onto the platform, and now the token holders of the infrastructure, which I'll get to what the token mechanics look like, can risk assess these projects and be rewarded for the accuracy of their projections. Okay, so then after they're risk assessed, investors can decide how they would like to invest into these projects. Revenue sharing, profit sharing, milestone oriented, they're low-cost loans, various different structures. So there's a set of smart contracts or investment, a template, a library of templates for these smart contracts. So you bring down the complexity, or you allow complexity and bring down that complexity, and having this uniform place where investors can now find the contract they would like to have with a potential project. Now, when this investor decides to engage on this project, right, they would like to invest in this project, they invest in them via the infrastructure. And then again, and the other point I do want to make here is investors can invest in these projects via using fiat or crypto. So it's not that it's just, it can be any value that flows through the platform. Okay, so now the next step is, as I previously said, you would think that, okay, so investor pays the project, there's a transparency, there is increased trust now, because now you just trust mathematics, you're not trusting a centralized authority, and there's increased access to these projects, right? And then they're repaid again via this system. However, as I previously said, we have a social impact as well. So most of the projects that are currently sourced onto this platform are specifically sustainable development goal oriented. So the reason being that each of these investors are also given impact credit. Now this is the piece that is novel to what we have done at Topple. So together with one of our advisors, who was formerly at the World Bank, we designed this impact credit, which if an investor is making that impact investment, they're given this credit. As an economic investor, you might not care about the impact you're making. So then you can go and sell this impact credit on this in our decentralized exchange to philanthropic and development money that has a mandate to reach these goals. So now what I will show you is, first of all, we'll show you so far we've actually sourced, oh, you can't see the world map very well, but Colombia, Rwanda, Uganda, South Africa, Fiji, and India, we have projects right now, and recently Indonesia. And like I said, these are also driven to impact. Now, what I want to specifically talk about, I'm going to run through that whole infrastructure again with an example, so that everyone can see exactly how it flows. So the second, that one where the zero hunger, this is the one I'm going to be talking about, is the early childhood education program. So meet Sarah. Sarah is a Colombian that has moved to America and has since been living here. She's a 30-something young professional and would like to pour back into Colombia. However, she doesn't want to do it through just a charity or a donation. She would like to have something a little bit more than a passive return, but an active investment that has impact. So Sarah finds out from her friends that there is this Topple platform. So she goes to the platform and finds Como que Vale. Now, Como que Vale is an early childhood organization, female-owned, that specifically focuses in the Cali slums, one of the biggest slums in Cali, actually. So what they've done, there's 8,000 kids in their organization. So they're semi-private, okay? So the government funds half, the rest is coming from charity. Now, what Como que Vale wants to try and do is be a sustainable business. Now, the way they would like to do that is because they're in these very remote regions, they'd like to source food into those areas. So they'd like to become a food distributor within these areas. So they have been talking to Unilever, who said, okay, we could bring these goods to you at a subsidized rate if we know where these goods are going, right? If there's some supply chain transparency of what's going on. So Como que Vale, not having the technical skills, goes to the BC Lab, which is one of our partners on the ground, and the BC Lab is specifically focused on how to connect development finance with institutions and also local projects. So the BC Lab helps them set up as a hub, because now they have all these ventures on the ground, but what it means to be a hub is, so it can either be a distributor or a crypto to fiat gateway, you know, so setting them up technologically so that they can do these functionalities. So think about, for example, on the ground, I'm going to give you an example of what we're building in South Africa right now, but there is a local group on the ground that have built their front end, and their front end just connects to our API. So they have their own project sourcing onto the platform, and that connects onto the API, and investors can now come to those projects. So ultimately, Sarah says, okay, I would like to invest in this. I would like to do a simple loan structure or a profit sharing specific structure with this venture, and then engaging in this conversation with the venture on the infrastructure, they can now decide okay, the UN's Peace Building Support Office has, and this is where we've been working with the UN. So the UN's Peace Building Support Office on the ground goes to these Komogewale ventures and literally certifies them or says, okay, they're in regions that were previously hit by civil war, and there's extreme hunger in these areas. So for every food distribution center that they open, we give them 10 credits, 0 hunger credits. And for everyone added, they get more credits. So if they said they wanted to, with the investment they put on, the proposal they put on the platform, they wanted to do 10 new ventures, then each of those ventures gave them some impact credit. Now, because Sarah's the investor, she can say, okay, we can negotiate how much of these impact credits are going to the venture, how much of that impact credit is going to the investor. Now, each of them have that distribution of impact credits. Now, there's organization within Colombia that would like to incentivize economic investors to come into that country. So they would like to say, okay, our main cause of purpose is to make an impact. So by making this impact, we would like to say, if we incentivize you by buying up all your impact credit, will you invest in this venture? So in that case, it's a previously agreed upon purchase agreement. Okay, so now the interesting thing about this decentralized exchange, right now, no, but yes, eventually. But yeah. They will be literally, the decentralized exchange would have them as specific credits you can trade. No, no, no. I will explain how the protocol works now. Yeah. So remember, this is just how the infrastructure works. So remember, on the ground, you have the hub. This is the backbone. So you have the hub on the ground that's pulling these ventures, and they're engaging with investors. So investor can invest in that hub using Ether, using whatever ERC20 token they would like. We've actually recently sidechained onto Ethereum, which allows that. No. It's just an infrastructure. It's a permissionless blockchain. So that's just the documentation is uploaded on both sides, and the contracts are resolved on the ground. Mitigation and everything takes place with the vent or the hub on the ground. Sure, you can. There's different versions, yeah. I mean, that's where we're going, right? This is pilot projects right now. But we can talk afterwards. I can give you the details of where we're at. Yeah. Which organization? No. Our foundation is a Dutch foundation. We run the whole infrastructure is run by a Dutch foundation, which is also later on the slide. Okay. Are we good there? Okay. I do like questions, so let's talk afterwards. I love that. Yes. Yes. No, so it's with the specific group within country, yes. So it's not the platform itself. So maybe, yeah. I mean, because this is or like I said, this is just a backbone, right? So it's not that for us as platform, if you want to think platform, this is a pure infrastructure that is. So when I get to the token mechanics, it might make more sense. Okay. So let's go, I can go to the token mechanics and also how the physical blockchain itself functions is what these questions are coming up from. So let me just give you guys some other projects that have been sourced and are piloting using the testnet as to see what they functionality for different functionality. Okay, so in Fiji we have, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with Gibson guitars, right? So Fiji is actually the second largest producer of mahogany trees, and I did not know that. Now there's a lot of indigenous issues within the country because of who owns these mahogany trees. So what the Fiji hub has been doing, there's also, I don't know who's familiar with Kava. You ever heard of Kava? Yes. So there are these two projects that are, so for instance, the hub within Fiji is sourcing this, has been sourcing this project where what has happened in the region is when you have your tropical cycles, they're struggling to have workers maintain them fully, like pay salaries, and they're losing their workers every off season. So to have a sustainable business, they would like to have an improved investment so that they can then keep on scaling this business. For the South Africa, so in South Africa, there's about 7 diamondries in South Africa that that are looking for a way, so it's one diamonder owning 7 different diamondries that would like to decommoditize their diamond. Okay, so create a brand. So think about a birth certificate for your diamond. So you can then have source to finger history of that full diamond. So as value transfers one way, you have the supply chain and every information from the location where it was mined, which is already recorded, the rough, what it looks like, which is already recorded, to all the authorizing bodies that are supplying information to this chain to come back as value transfers one way. So that's what makes this interesting supply chain, because you know the accuracy of that information due to money moving in the opposite direction. So the other piece is refugee entrepreneurship. We are working in Rwanda, where we are focusing on various different projects. After the genocide, there has been these refugee camps that have now grown, but organically grown, that are now local economies, because it's no longer refugee status, right? So what has happened, they don't have infrastructure. So they now need to build out these infrastructures within these communities that have evolved. So to do that, they need, some scaling, because their business has already grown, so they need to have some scaling. So we've been working with the UN mission on the ground there as well. So the other piece and the fun part about this is this chocolate. So the chocolate is from India. So what the idea is it's an organic farming community, which ultimately the hub on the ground is a farming cooperative, and they would like to have the farmers own their own brand. So when the chocolate, and these actually exist, and if you scan the QR, the chocolate talks to you and tells you where it's from, because all that information is recorded, and also you can see how much the farmer really owns of the product itself. So the next thing I want to show you guys is just the scope of people that have shown interest on using this infrastructure. Okay, so impact investing itself has this spectrum, right? You have aid and donations on the one side, and then on the whole other side, you have a traditional equity investor, or if you come a little bit closer, is an equity investor with some ESR screen. So what I've seen interesting is I've had robo-advisors, for instance, ask me if they could hook onto the API of because this is a permissionless blockchain. Yes, definitely they can hook onto the API of the platform. Hook on and grab some of these proposals that are coming onto the platform as theme investments, specifically for impact, for their clients, right? So you have that spectrum. And then another thing is I have larger banks or asset management firms, especially in South Africa, that are obligated to do corporate social investment, call it CSI, and would love to use this platform to source these projects, but then also be able to show their shareholders the impact they're making, right? So that's on the one side, and then you get the crowdfunding side, because this can be syndicated. So for instance, I've been talking to the Dutch Development Bank, who would like to not just take, usually these development banks take on the whole project themselves, but it's very difficult to do the syndicated project, so they would love to come in combination together with some crowdfunding, some specifically focused Dutch development, and what piece of each of that infrastructure is a part of them. And then charity, donation, grants, NGOs, these are like very interesting. I mean, there's even a donor coin. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. That would like to have an open infrastructure to be able to do their donations. So technically speaking, we are a single-use blockchain, built specifically for these investments, written in Scala for security, performance, and portability. We are working towards Ouroboros Genesis. Nick is here, lead blockchain developer, if you guys want to talk to him. And then we are a proof-of-stake blockchain. And I will say why I amplify that. I'll say in the next slide. More than willing to go to our GitHub and play around on we are on our 5th testnet now and have successfully sidechained onto the Ethereum blockchain, which allows ERC20 tokens to be used to invest into these projects. And then the token mechanics itself. Okay, so this is a dual-use token. So now you have to think there are investments flowing through this platform, right? So investor on this side, you have projects on the other side. So for every investment flowing through the platform, there is also the underlying backbone of this infrastructure is tokens, right? So you have the proof of stake token specifically can be used for earning these transaction fees. So for instance, if you owned 1% of the tokens, the Arbits, which is what our token's called, 1% of those the transaction fees flowing through our infrastructure into Mexico, into Guatemala, into wherever it's going, that is what you will receive as, on average, what you will receive as an Arbit holder by validating the system. Okay, so then the other use case for this is that you can participate in the prediction markets. So the two utilities of this token is specifically you can collect transaction fees for investments flowing through the platform, or you can participate in these prediction markets and be rewarded for the accuracy of your projections. So in this side of things, I've actually been talking to Wolfram, the team over at Wolfram, where it's ultimately, you know, it's data analytics. That's what makes this very interesting, because now you might have an organic chocolate project, which you don't have that previously. So now you have data for organic project, and you have data for a non-organic project. Now, as a financial analyst, you can actually look at the difference between these two. So those are the two uses of the platform. Like I said, we're run by a Dutch foundation. So both the infrastructure, I say this because 25% of the tokens will be held by the foundation, the rest will be sold, and it will be held in a locked escrow, and the money will only be used, the transaction fees collected by the foundation, for the future development of the protocol itself. Then our team, Nick is here, lead blockchain engineer. Chris, our CEO, is in the Netherlands right now. I am CFO, and then Jim, CTO, is finishing up his atomic experimental physics degree at Rice University. We met in Houston, like I said, under coffees, and now we have about 10 people in our team, 40% female, very proud of that. And we have advisors, being first-time entrepreneurs and being people that are trying to academically make sure that this is also feasible. We have advisors, academic statisticians, like I said, former economists formerly of the World Bank, security, actually another professor in computer security, and private equity and quantitative analytics individuals. So yeah, so that is Topol, and now you can ask the difficult questions. I'm looking at you. Okay, anyone else? So, question. Does someone else have a question? I think you're gonna like me after this. Okay. Yes, good. Yes. Mm-hmm. No, it's information. Yeah, so you have to remember, well, first of all, the escrowing, right? So as an investor releases, like, so the so say for instance, let's just keep it simple. You have a infrastructure or smart contract, right? Where you have a construction business specifically on the other side, right? So there's certain parties that have to receive X capital, right? So that is completely transparent, and the individual signing for that, like digitally signing, um, has there's mathematical proof that that individual is signing, right? So does it remove corruption? No. Does it reduce mitigation so that there is evidence of exactly who did what, when, where, and how? That information is contained. Now, the other thing is like you have to remember leapfrogging, right? So the concept of leapfrogging that we're seeing in a lot of developed markets. So like for instance, in Kenya, we have M-Pesa, right? So all of a sudden you have people who never had seen the telephone, like the wired telephone in their life, use mobile phones to pay all their vendors. So now you can connect that whole information, right? So that information, the hub is distributing that money to the ventures, which then the venture can distribute to their individuals, their workers. So that transparency, dependent on how transparent that venture is, and remember the venture when it's pulled onto the platform, they are also getting some reputation. There's a blockchain history for every engagement that these projects are making. So say for instance, so right now we're bootstrapping, right? So it's pulling on projects that have people on the ground that have reputation, like the UN's Peace Building Support Office, like the UN's mission in Rwanda. So these are all trusted entities already, right? Now, these are just starting. So eventually, we want to step back and say, whoever wants to propose, put their proposal on the platform, they can do that. Because this is open, permissionless, like blockchain. It's not us running the show. But those people would self-select eventually. Because if they're not putting a proper proposal on there, no one's going to be investing in them. If they're not putting all the information necessary that that individual wants, the investor might say, engage with that venture and say, I don't have enough information. Can you give me your certifying agreement? Can you? Yes. So all these things have to be uploaded and it's all recorded within the system comparative to these individuals, right? So now it's more transparent in that sense, and now you have access to this market, but you don't have to think, so the complexity reduces drastically. Do I think that people might try and ride the system? Definitely. I'm South African. Yes. Do I think that this is a way that you can mitigate corruption? Yes. Because that's the other thing, is on the ground in some of these countries, you have these engagements with international, like foreign direct investment. Then usually these ventures have to go fight in New York court. Okay? Now, because you're bringing the investment to this local region, the mitigation happens on the ground. Okay, now if mitigation is happening on the ground, the question is, that's now between what's going on, like what happened, when, where, and how. So a lot of these current projects are these scaling projects too, right? So now it's just bringing their business to the next level, and then if they're successfully investing, right, if they have an successful reputation after the first investment, then investors can start competing for that venture. So they can build their own reputation on this platform. So the venture can then say, okay, first venture, second, third. Now I'm on my seventh one. I have 4 different investors interested in me. And now I had access to foreign direct investment. And the same with the investor on this side might say, you know, I want a little bit more risky investment. I want to make an impact. I'm going to take this on. So it's not for everyone's appetite, but there is an opportunity, and there is a supply of that opportunity on the other side. So yeah. Prediction markets. So it's crowdsourced due diligence. It's token holders. So for instance, I have been talking to Rice University of giving their financial engineering department some tokens to do some prediction analytics as arbiters, so for the accuracy of their projections. So for instance, when they put a proposal off, there has to be a legitimate, like, raise, 10,000 for 100 kilograms of coffee. So that prediction can then be done, and these the arbiters can then bet on these predictions and say whether or not they think they will be successful. So yeah. Yeah, but if you think about it, like, so that's actually, so when we started out with this, and I mean, if people get bored, sure, but the interesting thing about that is, like, right here, you put a proposal on the platform, you can choose if you would like a prediction market opened on your proposal, so to get some reputation. So you choose that, right? So prediction market opens, and now arbiters can participate. So now you have some form of risk assessment, right? You have some form of impact assessment from a local party. So now investor can decide if they're engaging. And now the arbiters can be rewarded for that projection. So it's in the ecosystem, ultimately. These prediction markets are specific to these specific venture analysis. So that's why I said that's why I've been having these conversations with Wolfram's team, because it's literally like, oh, there's a specific cause, there's a specific analysis. So we want to scrape that data and make it easy to analyze that data as arbiters.
I'd also like to add, in my opinion, Augur's UI is absolutely terrible to use. And we're trying to learn from that and make it much easier for people to participate and actually be able to understand what's happening.
Yes.
Are there any plans to
So yes, we have been talking about that. Might be like a V2 right after. Yeah, we're right now bare bones, get the protocol. So right now we're, like I said, 5th version of testnet. Mainnet launch Q1 2019, where we'll start with our Colombia project, which we've sourced about 10 million of investable opportunities onto the platform. So that will start, and we'll learn from that going forward. So that's why the foundation will eventually be funding just protocol development, not anything else. Any other questions? Yes.
After going through a lot of these blockchain meetings, and I see a large diversity of blockchain implementations.
Oh yeah.
How do you foresee your blockchain interacting with complementary blockchains, like for instance, carbon credit or fresh water, and how is it?
So that's why when I said side chaining previously, right? So that's kind of where that value can now be used on the platform. So say someone wanted to use a stable coin like the DAI or some other Tether or whatever to do their investment, they can now do that. So yes. So you can bring that onto the platform and bring it out too. You can take your money out.
Decentralized markets. So whether that be us or whether that be somebody else trading, you know, it's on a swap system or something like that.
Just yeah. Okay. Any other question? Suggestions? Perfect. Okay. Though you're gonna like me eventually. Me, you might not like that, but you like me. Okay, thank you guys.